The words, thin and reedy, scratched out of her throat like she was trying to dislodge something sharp. Something stuck there for decades. "Callum," she'd whispered. Her eyes, usually so sharp even in her fading state, clouded over with something I couldn't quite name. Guilt? Relief. I raised the wrong baby. It hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath. I remember gripping the metal rail of her hospital bed, my knuckles white, the cold aluminum digging into my palm. The room, which moments before had felt suffocatingly quiet, was suddenly filled with a roaring silence. Or maybe that was just in my head. The heart monitor beeped on, a steady, indifferent rhythm, charting a life that was slowly, inevitably slipping away. Graham, Eleanor, my grandmother. She was 87, brittle, her skin almost translucent after weeks in this place. I was 31, and for all those years, she'd been the bedrock, the unshakable constant in my life. My parents, well, they were around, but she was everything. My mom, her daughter, always a bit distant, a bit wrapped up in her own world. My dad, quiet, solid. But Graham was the storyteller, the one who'd pick me up from school, the one who taught me to bake her famous apple pie, the one who knew everything about me, or so I thought. Wrong, baby? The question came out as a strangled croak. I didn't even recognize my own voice. My mind was a kaleidoscope of jumbled images. Her holding me as a toddler, her braiding my hair before school, her teaching me to ride my first bike, her standing proudly at my college graduation. Every memory, every single one, suddenly felt tainted, unreal. Was it the meds? Was she just confused? Senile? No. Her eyes, though clouded, had held a terrible clarity in that moment. A burden lifted, perhaps. Or one finally revealed. She tried to say more, a weak cough, a catch in her breath, but the words wouldn't come. Her hand, papery and cool, twitched on the sheet. I squeezed it instinctively, then pulled back slightly, a strange aversion coiling in my stomach. The woman who had loved me, nurtured me, worried over me for 3 decades, had just confessed, what? That I wasn't who I thought I was? That my entire lineage, my identity, was a lie? My chest felt tight, like someone was pressing down on it. My vision swam. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand answers, but looking at her, frail and fading, I knew there wouldn't be any more. Not from her, anyway. Just this cryptic, earth-shattering statement, delivered with her last reserves of strength. She closed her eyes then, a soft exhale, and the rhythm of the monitor faltered, then sped up erratically before settling into a long, drawn-out flatline. The nurses rushed in, a flurry of efficient, practice movements, but I barely registered them. All I could hear was her whisper, echoing in the cavern of my skull. I raised the wrong baby. My world in that instant had not just shifted on its axis, it had shattered into a million pieces. The nurses had eventually ushered me out gently, professionally, after what felt like an eternity. My mom, Catherine, arrived soon after, her face blotchy from crying, leaning heavily on my dad, David. They weren't quite as close to Graham as I was, I don't think. My mom and her mother always had this complicated relationship. Love was there, sure, but also a tension, an unspoken history that I'd never really understood. Dad, bless him, was just a solid presence, holding my mom, occasionally patting my shoulder, his usual quiet strength. But even his eyes held a baffled sadness. None of them, I knew, had heard Graham's last terrible whisper. My whole life, it had been Graham. She lived just a few blocks from us in that big, rambling Victorian house on Elm Street, the one with the porch swing and the overflowing rose bushes. Every day after kindergarten, then elementary, then even middle school, I'd walk over there. She'd have cookies waiting, or sometimes her famous lemon bars, and we'd sit at the kitchen table, the afternoon sun slanting through the big bay window, and she'd listen to me talk about my day. My parents were always busy. My mom, a whirlwind of committees and volunteer work, always out, always doing something for someone else, but rarely, it felt, for us. My dad, an accountant, worked long hours, dependable, but not much for conversation after a day of numbers. Graham filled that void. She was the one who taught me to ride a bike on the cracked pavement of her driveway, patiently holding the back of the seat, then letting go with a laugh as I wobbled off. She took me to the library every Saturday, letting me pick out whatever books I wanted, no limits. We'd spend hours there, then go for ice cream at Miller's down the street. She was the one who cheered loudest at my school plays, the one who smuggled me extra slices of pie at holiday dinners when my mom was watching my sugar intake. She was my person. My birth, as I'd always understood it, was pretty straightforward. August 14th, 1992, at St. Jude's Hospital, in our town, Riverbend, Pennsylvania. Mom was 28, Dad was 30. Graham, according to family lore, was practically in the delivery room with them, hovering. She was just that kind of grandmother, fiercely devoted. When I was born, a healthy 8 pounds, 2 ounces, she apparently took me directly from the nurse's arms, even before my mom got to hold me, cradling me and whispering, "My Callum, my beautiful boy." It was a story told often, always with a chuckle, about Graham's overeagerness, her absolute adoration. And I'd always just laughed along, proud of how much she loved me. Looking back now through this new, horrifying lens, little things started to ripple, shifts in the narrative. My mom, Catherine, often seemed almost disengaged when talk turned to my babyhood. She'd usually just nod along, a faraway look in her eyes, letting Graham dominate the stories. If I ever asked about specific details from my first year, like who first changed my diaper or what my first word was, my mom would defer to Graham. "Oh, your grandmother would know that, Callum." She was always there, and Graham always had an answer, precise and immediate. I'd always thought it was just because Graham was so observant, so present. Now, it felt like my mom almost didn't remember, or didn't want to. Another thing, there were barely any baby photos of me with my mom alone from the earliest months. Most pictures included Graham, her arm around my mom, or her holding me, or my dad holding me. My mom was often in the background or looking a little strained, smiling a bit too tightly. I'd attributed it to new parent stress, you know. She was young, maybe overwhelmed. Graham, on the other hand, was always beaming, completely at ease. She had a whole album dedicated just to my first year, bursting with pictures, all taken by her. She even joked once, "I practically raised you from birth, Callum." Your mom was still figuring things out. We both laughed. It wasn't a joke, was it? Then there were the whispers. Sometimes, when I'd come home from school, I'd hear muffled voices from the living room, my mom and Graham. They'd stop abruptly when I walked in. Sometimes Graham would clear her throat too loudly, or my mom would suddenly become intensely interested in the newspaper. They'd just look at each other, this quick, knowing glance that I couldn't decipher. "Everything all right?" I'd ask. "Just woman talk, dear," Graham would say, a little too quickly, dismissing me with a wave of her hand and a forced smile. I never thought anything of it. Every family had secrets, right? Private conversations, but now it felt like those weren't just woman talk, they were secrets about me. The ground under my feet, the very story of my existence, was dissolving, and I was only just realizing how many small, almost imperceptible cracks had always been there. The week after Graham's funeral was a blur. People came and went from our house, a steady stream of casseroles and hushed condolences. I floated through it all, numb, barely registering faces or names. My parents, wrapped in their own grief, didn't seem to notice my detached state. They just thought I was heartbroken over Graham, and I was, but not in the way they imagined. The words she'd uttered, those 6 horrifying words, were a constant, corrosive whisper in my head. I raised the wrong baby. I tried to push it down, to rationalize it, She was old, she was on heavy pain meds, she was confused. It had to be that, right? But the harder I tried to convince myself, the more those little ripples from my past, those subtle inconsistencies, turned into crashing waves. The baby photos, my mom's distance, the hushed conversations, they coalesced into a terrifying mosaic, a picture I didn't want to see. Incident 1, the kitchen conversation. About 10 days after the funeral, everyone had finally cleared out. My mom, Catherine, was in the kitchen, carefully washing the last of the borrowed platters. Dad was in the living room, probably watching some golf. I came in trying to be casual, but my hands were shaking. I just needed to say something. "Mom," I started, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. She turned, her movements a little slow, still heavy with grief. "Yes, honey. It's about Graham." I paused, my throat suddenly dry. Something she said, right before, her brow furrowed slightly. "What about it?" "She was fading, Callum. Didn't always make sense." She turned back to the sink, scrubbing a particularly stubborn spot on a ceramic dish. "No, it was clear." She looked right at me. I took a deep breath. "She said she raised the wrong baby." The scrubbing stopped. The silence in the kitchen was immediate and absolute, save for the faint drip of the faucet. My mom stood there, her back to me, perfectly still. I watched her shoulders, rigid. It felt like an eternity. Finally, she exhaled, a shaky, barely audible breath. "Callum, don't be ridiculous. The medication she was on, it messes with your head. Of course she didn't mean that. You're our son. Her grandson." Her voice was flat, devoid of the usual maternal warmth. She still hadn't turned around. "Mom, please. Just turn around." She did, slowly, her face pale. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, were wide and a little panicked. She looked caught. "What do you want me to say, Callum?" "Your grandmother loved you." She was confused at the end. That's all there is to it. She avoided my gaze, looking somewhere over my shoulder. But what if she wasn't confused? What if she meant it? My voice rose, desperate. "Mom, there have always been things, little thing, about my birth, about your memories of me as a baby. You always deferred to Graham. There are barely any pictures of us together when I was tiny. And Graham always said she practically raised me." My mom's face crumbled. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, shaking her head. Tears welled in her eyes, but they looked like tears of fear, not just grief. "Callum, you're distraught. It's the grief. You need to sleep." She tried to hug me, but I pulled away. The embrace felt wrong. She looked hurt, but also something else. Guilt. "No, Mom. I'm not distraught. I need answers. If you know something, anything, you have to tell me." She finally broke eye contact, looking down at her hands, twisting the dish towel. I can't. Not right now." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, just let it go for now. For Graham's sake." That last part, "for Graham's sake," just twisted the knife. It was like she was saying, don't tarnish Graham's memory by digging up her secret. It told me everything. She knew. She absolutely knew something. Incident 2. Talking to Layla. I couldn't just let it go. My best friend, Layla, who I'd known since second grade, was the only person I could confide in. We met for coffee a couple of days later at our usual spot, the Daily Grind. She knew Graham well, had practically grown up at her house with me. "Graham said what?" Layla's eyes went wide, her cappuccino forgotten. "Callum, that's wild. Are you sure you heard her right?" "I heard her, Layla," clear as a bell. I recounted the conversation with my mom, the way she froze, her panicked eyes. She's hiding something, Layla. I know it. Layla was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee. She's always been pragmatic, thoughtful. Okay, so what does that even mean? Raise the wrong baby. Like at the hospital? A mix-up? That's what I'm thinking. Or something else, I don't know. It's all I can think about. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling utterly lost. My whole life. What if it's a lie? Your mom would tell you, wouldn't she? Eventually. She won't. She practically begged me to drop it. Said, for Graham's sake. That's code for, this is Graham's big secret, and I'm protecting it. Layla bit her lip. You know, now that you mention it, there was that one time, I must have been, 10 or 11? We were at Graham's house, and she was going through old photo albums. We came across this one picture. I think it was from when you were maybe 6 months old. And your mom, she was looking at it, and she just had this really sad look, like she was mourning something. And Graham? She quickly flipped the page, like she didn't want your mom to dwell on it. I remember thinking it was weird at the time, but then just forgot about it. A cold knot formed in my stomach. You remember that? I don't. Yeah, it was just a fleeting thing, but it always stuck with me because your mom looked so unlike herself. Usually she's so put together, but in that moment, she just looked heartbroken. And Graham looked really uncomfortable. It was another piece of the puzzle, another confirmation that this wasn't just a dying woman's hallucination. This was real. Incident 3. The birth certificate search. After talking to Layla, the urge to find proof, anything concrete, became overwhelming. I knew where my mom kept important documents, a fireproof safe in her home office closet. I felt like a criminal, sneaking around in my own home, but I couldn't stop myself. My parents were out at a dinner party. I found the safe, then the spare key, hidden behind a loose floorboard, just like I remembered from when I was a kid and needed my allowance. Inside, nestled beneath insurance policies and old tax returns, was my original birth certificate. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. Callum Michael Foster. Date of birth, August 14th, 1992. Place of birth, St. Jude's Hospital, Riverbend, Pennsylvania. Mother, Catherine Eleanor Foster. Father, David Andrew Foster. Everything was exactly as it should be. No red flags, no anomalies. It felt like a punch to the gut, but also a wave of relief. See? I told you, Callum. It was nothing. Just Graham's mind playing tricks. Just me being paranoid. I stared at the official seal, the neat, typewritten script. This was it. Proof. It was all a misunderstanding. But then my gaze drifted to the bottom, to the attending physician line. Dr. Elaine Hayes. I didn't recognize the name. Not that I would, really. But for some reason, it stuck in my head. A fleeting thought, wasn't Doctor Albright our family doctor? The one who delivered my cousin, Noah? I shrugged it off. Different doctors, different hospitals, it happened. I carefully folded the certificate and put it back, locking the safe, trying to convince myself I had closure. The relief, though, felt hollow, temporary. The seed of doubt had already taken root, and a piece of paper, even an official one, wasn't enough to kill it. My gut still screamed that something was terribly wrong. Incident 4. The hospital visit. The name, Doctor Elaine Hayes, kept nagging at me. It gnawed at the edges of my mind. Why was it bothering me so much? I started doing some very discreet online searching, just small, casual queries, trying to look for a doctor. Hayes, associated with St. Jude's around 1992. Nothing came up initially. Then I widened my search, including nearby towns, other hospitals. Still nothing. It felt strange. Wouldn't a doctor who had delivered babies for years have some kind of online footprint, even if retired? I decided, against my better judgment, to go to St. Jude's. I told my parents I was going for a drive, needed to clear my head. The old hospital building, still standing though mostly used for administrative offices now, felt imposing. I walked into the main reception area, trying to appear nonchalant. "Excuse me," I said to the woman behind the desk, a kind-faced woman with spectacles perched on her nose. I was hoping to find some information about a former physician. Dr. Elaine Hayes. She would have been practicing here, or perhaps another local hospital, around 1992. The woman typed for a moment, then frowned. "Hayes, you said? Elaine?" "Yes." My heart hammered against my ribs. She shook her head. "I'm not showing any record of an Elaine Hayes ever being on staff here at St. Jude's, not in that time frame, and not at any of our affiliated hospitals either. Are you sure of the name?" My blood ran cold. The birth certificate, my official birth certificate bearing the name of a doctor who, according to hospital records, didn't exist here. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a deliberate deception. My internal struggle, the push and pull of denial and suspicion, had finally tipped over. Graham wasn't confused. My mother wasn't just grieving. They were covering something up, and the proof was right there, in a fabricated name on a piece of paper that was supposed to be the foundation of my identity. The tension in my life wasn't just escalating, it had just snapped. My legs felt like jelly when I walked out of St. Jude's that afternoon. The late autumn air, usually crisp and refreshing, felt heavy, suffocating. The colorful leaves that lined the street, swirling in small eddies with the wind, usually brought me a sense of peace. Now they just seemed to mock me. A vibrant, uncaring world continuing its cycle, while mine had just ground to a halt. I got into my car, but I couldn't drive. My hands were shaking too badly to grip the steering wheel. I just sat there, head in my hands, the receptionist's polite, firm words echoing in my mind. No record of an Elaine Hayes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a lie. A carefully constructed lie. My birth certificate, the document that legally defined me, was a fake. The implications were staggering, monumental. My entire life, my identity, everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family, was built on sand. Graham's confession wasn't the ramblings of a sick old woman. It was her final, desperate attempt to unburden herself. And my mom was complicit. My thoughts were a chaotic mess. Denial battled with a cold, hard certainty. No, this can't be happening. But it was. The physical sensation was overwhelming. My chest felt hollowed out, my stomach churned, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I felt lightheaded, like I was going to pass out. I fumbled for my phone, instinctively wanting to call Layla, but then stopped. What would I even say? "Hey, just found out I don't exist?" No. This conversation had to happen face to face. With them. I drove home on autopilot, the familiar route feeling alien. The old Victorian houses, the oak trees, the familiar storefronts of downtown Riverbend. Nothing felt real. When I pulled into our driveway, my mom's car was there. Dad's wasn't. He usually worked late on Tuesdays. Good. This needed to be just us. I walked through the front door, the sound of the latch clicking surprisingly loud in the quiet house. My mom was in the living room, curled up on the sofa, reading a novel. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow through the large bay window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A mug of tea sat on the coffee table, a faint wisp of steam rising from it. Everything looked so normal, so domestic, so utterly deceptive. "Callum, you're home early," she said, looking up, a soft smile on her face. It was the kind of smile she'd given me my entire life. My mom's smile. And suddenly, it felt like a mask. I just stood there, clutching my car keys in my hand, the metal digging into my palm. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. "Mom," I started, my voice hoarse. We need to talk. Right now. Her smile faltered. She must have seen something in my face. The sheer, raw anguish. She slowly put her book down. What is it, honey? You look dreadful. It's about Graham, what she said. I walked further into the room, stopping directly in front of her. I know you know something. She flinched, her eyes widening slightly. Callum, we already talked about this. You're upset. It was the medication. She tried to sound reassuring, but her voice cracked. Don't lie to me anymore. My voice was rising, raw with emotion. I went to St. Jude's today. I asked about Dr. Elaine Hayes, the doctor who supposedly delivered me. I watched her face carefully. It drained of all color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She just stared at me, her eyes wide, glassy with terror. They have no record of her, Mom. Not then, not ever. Silence. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed the half hour, its steady tick-tock mocking the stillness in the room. The air was thick, suffocating. I could hear my own ragged breathing, loud and desperate. Mom, who am I? I whispered, the words tearing from my throat. Who am I? And why did Graham say she raised the wrong baby? Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. She looked like she was about to shatter. Callum, I can't. You have to. You have to tell me. Everything. I dropped my keys on the coffee table with a clatter. My birth certificate is a fake, isn't it? It's a lie. Was I adopted? Was I switched? What happened? The questions tumbled out, fast and furious, desperate for an answer. She finally looked up, her gaze fixed on me, tears streaming down her face now. Oh, Callum. My poor boy. Her voice was a broken whisper. It was a long time ago. We just wanted to protect you. Protect me from what, Mom? From the truth. I felt a surge of cold fury. For 31 years, you let me believe this. You and Graham. 31 years. What kind of protection is that? She closed her eyes, tears still flowing freely. Her whole body trembled. Your grandmother. She made me promise. She said it was for the best. For everyone. Promise what? What promise, Mom? I was practically begging now, my voice hoarse, raw. Tell me! Just tell me what happened. She finally opened her eyes, and there was a deep, terrible sorrow in them, mixed with a profound exhaustion. She took a shuddering breath, then another. You weren't born at St. Jude's, Callum. You weren't. You were born at a different hospital, almost 200 miles from here, in Port Providence. Port Providence. My mind immediately conjured up images of a small coastal town in Maryland, where my dad's extended family had lived for generations. We visited there for summer vacations when I was a kid. It clicked into place with horrifying speed. And who were my parents, Mom? My real parents? She shook her head, unable to speak, just sobbing now, her hands covering her face. The sound was guttural, full of years of suppressed pain. The room felt like it was spinning. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the rug in front of her, feeling the coarse fibers against my knees. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was real. And my entire existence was, at this very moment, being rewritten. The confession hung in the air, thick and heavy, for what felt like hours. My mom, Catherine, eventually managed to compose herself enough to speak, her voice still shaky, punctuated by soft sobs. What followed was a fragmented, agonizing account, delivered in halting sentences, often interrupted by her own distress, or by my desperate questions. She told me I was indeed born in Port Providence, not a hospital mix-up, not an adoption, something far messier. My biological mother, a young woman named Bethany, who was only 16 at the time, was a distant relative of my Graham's, a cousin twice removed, I think. Unwed, scared, and in a deeply conservative community, she'd given birth in secret, arranged through a doctor who was discreet. Graham, Eleanor, had traveled to Port Providence under the guise of visiting relatives, but her real mission was to bring me back. My mom, Catherine, had just miscarried her own baby a few weeks prior, a devastating loss after years of trying. Graham, seeing her daughter's pain and knowing Bethany's desperate situation, orchestrated it all. She brought me home, presenting me as Catherine's newborn, convincing everyone, including my dad, that I was their biological child. The fake birth certificate, the whole elaborate charade, was all Graham's doing, designed to fix her daughter's broken heart and give me a good home. My dad, David, walked in halfway through this bombshell revelation. He found my mom sobbing uncontrollably, me sitting on the floor, staring blankly, feeling like my world was collapsing. He took one look at us, then at me, then back at Catherine, and the color drained from his face. "Catherine, what's going on?" he asked, his voice strained. He didn't know. He truly didn't know. That was another twist, another layer of deception I hadn't anticipated. My mom had just admitted she'd kept this from her husband, too. He was furious, hurt, and utterly bewildered. The immediate consequence was chaos, not just for me, but for their marriage. They started sleeping in separate rooms that night. The comfortable silence of their shared life shattered. Practical problems surfaced almost immediately. My own birth certificate, supposedly the cornerstone of my identity, was a fraud. My social security number, my driver's license, my passport, were they all based on a lie? Would I have to get a new one? How do you even go about proving your identity when your official birth record is a fabrication? The thought of navigating that bureaucratic nightmare on top of the emotional fallout made my head spin. I called a lawyer Layla recommended, an estate planning attorney who also handled family law. He listened patiently, then sighed. "Callum, this is complicated. You're essentially in a legal gray area. We'd need to establish your biological identity, likely through DNA, and then possibly petition the court for a corrected birth certificate. It's not an overnight fix." My savings, already modest, suddenly felt woefully inadequate. My relationship with my parents became fractured. My mom was a wreck of guilt and relief, still trying to rationalize Graham's actions. My dad was angry, feeling betrayed by both his wife and his mother-in-law. "How could you, Catherine? How could you let me believe he was mine for 30 years? What kind of a woman does that?" I heard him shout one night, the words piercing through the walls of my old bedroom. I felt like an intruder in my own home, a living, breathing secret that had finally exploded. Layla, bless her, was my rock. She came over every evening, bringing food, just sitting with me, letting me talk or just be silent. "It's a lot, Callum. Just breathe," she'd say, holding my hand. But her own parents, who had known my family for decades, reacted with a mixture of shock and quiet pity. Her mom, Nancy especially, was visibly uncomfortable, whispering condolences that felt more like apologies. I felt like a spectacle, a tragic story, making the rounds in our small community. The emotional roller coaster was relentless. There were moments of profound sadness, grieving the loss of the family I thought I had, the person I thought I was. Then waves of anger, red-hot rage at Graham for her deception, at my mom for her complicity, but also, surprisingly, a flicker of something else. Hope? A perverse curiosity to know the truth about Bethany, my biological mother. What was she like? Did I look like her? Did she ever think about me? This was the biggest, most unexpected discovery. That beneath the pain and the betrayal, there was an intense, aching desire to find the other half of my story. It was a chaotic mix, a turbulent sea of feelings, and I was just trying to keep my head above water. So that's where I am now. It's been about 2 months since Graham passed, and this whole thing came crashing down. My life is, well, it's not really my life anymore. Not in the way I understood it. I'm still living in my childhood home, mostly because I just don't have the energy to figure out moving right now. My parents are still living under the same roof, but barely speaking, the air between them thick with resentment and unspoken words. It's horrible to witness, and I feel like the ghost of Graham's secret is haunting every room. I've started the legal process, the lawyer, mister. Henderson is working on tracking down any records from that Port Providence hospital, trying to find anything on my biological mother, Bethany. It's a slow, painstaking road, and honestly, the thought of all the paperwork and the cost is just another heavy weight. I even bought one of those DNA testing kits, the kind you send away for. It's sitting on my nightstand, still in its box. I haven't had the courage to open it yet. Part of me is terrified of what it might say, what new truths it might reveal, and part of me is just so tired of being adrift. What have I learned? That people, even the ones you love most, are capable of incredible deception, driven by what they perceive as love or protection. Graham thought she was doing something good, I guess, but her actions created a ripple effect of lies that ultimately shattered multiple lives. I've learned that identity isn't just a birth certificate. It's a lifetime of memories, experiences, and connections. And those are real, even if the foundation was shaky. I'm still Callum. I still have Graham's apple pie recipe memorized. But I'm also someone else, someone unknown. My future plans feel like they're written in invisible ink right now. Dating? How do you even bring this up? Hey, just so you know, my entire legal existence is a fabrication, and I don't actually know who my biological parents are. My relationships with my parents are strained, almost beyond repair. I love them, I really do, but there's this raw wound of betrayal. I keep wondering if I'll ever truly forgive them. I just wanted to put this out there. It's a lot to process. Thanks for reading if you made it this far. It helps just to type it all out, to have it somewhere outside my own head. I guess I'm still asking myself, what do I do now? How do I even begin to piece together a life, a real identity, from the wreckage of this secret? And if I do find Bethany, my biological mother, what then? What do you say to someone you never knew, who gave you away, but is still somehow inextricably a part of who you are? The answers feel impossibly far away.